Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, it is kind of a special video. So as I've told you before, or as you may already know, in Scotland the 31st of December is the big celebration for New Year. We call this Hogmanay, so this is when you want to crack out your really nice beers and just enjoy it with friends and family. Here in Japan though, it's the 1st of January, the actual during the day on the 1st of January that is where the main kind of celebrations take place, of course, and tomorrow I will have a very special video for you as well. For this one, my Hogmanay beer review though, we're going to return to one of my favourite Japanese beer breweries, and we're having a taste of a beer that I think should be really quite special. Big shout out to Koji at Liquor Shop Asahiya in Osaka for keeping this one aside for me. So we're going to return to Tamamura Honten from Nagano Prefecture here in Japan, and this is another one of their Shiga Kogen beers. This guy is the Takashi Ichiro, which is an Imperial Stout coming in at 13%, and it's been aged for a year in Chichibu Distillery barrels. So I think this beer should be very, very interesting. I had a barrel-aged Imperial IPA from them before, and it was again aged in these Chichibu Distillery barrels, and it turned out very, very nicely. So I'm very curious to see how the Imperial Stout turns out. So yeah, this one I think will be a really, really nice beer. And you know, with I hope you guys that are watching the channel, as I always say, a huge thank you to you guys for your support over 2018, and I'm sure it will continue into 2019, and we'll see what interesting beers we can review over next year as well. So yeah, so let's have a go at this one then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery. I'll also tell you a little brief snippet about the Chichibu Distillery as well. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward a little bit, as I always say. There's all the usual social media in the description below. You can check all that out. If you want to learn more about the brewery, you can check out the brewery website, and there's also a link there to my other reviews from Tamamura Honten and Shiga Kogen beer. If you want to see more beer reviews, as I say, please consider subscribing to the channel. You can check out the playlists of all the beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Japanese beers that I've reviewed for you, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Tamamura Honten and Shiga Kogen then. So as I've told you before, Tamamura Honten is based in Yamanouchi in Nagano Prefecture in Japan. It's a few hundred kilometres to the northwest of Tokyo, and this area is particularly well known for its ski slopes and also for its kind of natural hot springs as well. But the Tamamura Honten company began brewing sake back in 1805, and recently they began brewing beer under the name of Shiga Kogen beer, and they also produce some of their own wines as well. So the head brewer is Sato Eigo, who joined the company in 2003, and the idea to brew beer came when the number of skiers visiting the resort really began to dwindle. So in May of 2004, they applied for a beer brewing license, and they received it 4 months later. They bought their brewing equipment, and then they trained for a week at a brewery in Kyushu before beginning their own commercial activities, and they only had a consultant to help them in the very, very early stages. So you know, they've gone on to be one of the best, if not the best, craft brewery in Japan, which is a very, very impressive feat when you consider how little training they actually had. But Tamamura Honten produced their own hops, their own sake rice, barley, buckwheat and blueberries. They've actually got their own hop variety as well, which is called the Shinsu Waze, which is a hybrid between the Czech Sats and one of the local Japanese varieties. They originally used it as a bittering hop for their lagers, but they now use it as an aroma hop in IPAs and things like that as well. But the brewery also has 2 tasting rooms, which are known as Teppa rooms. One is at the brewery and one is at the Shiga Kogen Ichinose Hotel Shali Shiga as well, which isn't too far away actually from Osaka, if I remember quite clearly. But the bottle art on these things, or the label art, is designed by Tanaka Noriyuki, and you know, a lot of these label arts, they're very tasteful actually. You know, they're very kind of similar to the to the sake labels and things that you'll find, which are very, very cool. So it's a very kind of traditional sort of Japanese style artwork that you'll find on these Shiga Kogen Tamamura Honten beers. But yeah, very, very good brew this one. This must be review number 7 or 8 that I've done from these guys, and I'll tell you straight away, they never ever disappoint. Their beers are always very, very solid and pretty damn good, to be honest. I always enjoy reviewing beers from these guys. So yeah, just a little bit about the Chichibu Distillery then as well. So the Chichibu Distillery It's based in the city of Chichibu in Saitama Prefecture in Japan, and it was founded by Ichiro Akuto back in 2004, and they were operational from 2008, and apparently this was the first new whisky distillery in Japan since 1973. A lot of the ones that are around just now, Japan of course is doing some really pretty awesome whisky as well as craft beer and wines and sakes and stuff like this. They're very good at making alcohol here, which is great for me. But yeah, this was the first new distillery in Japan since 1973, and I think there's been a few more have kind of started up operations since then, which is very, very cool. So yeah, two really interesting companies involved in this one. So without further ado, let's get my bottle opener and let's get on to the tasting of this beer itself. So like I said, this one is a 13% Imperial Stout, and it's aged for 1 year in Chichibu Distillery barrels. And yeah, so they must have brewed this beer sometime around, they must have finished brewing it, pardon me, sometime around, you know, like October of 2017 actually, to get this into the barrels and things like that. So this beer has been around for a little bit actually. But yeah, without further ado then, let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting. There's another little quick look at the artwork on this one for you. There you can see, if you zoom in on this, let me just check that the camera is seeing this, there's the Tamamura Honten symbol there, and if we go up a little bit, there is the Chichibu Distillery symbol there as well. You can see Ichiro's malt. But yeah, really nice looking beer this one. So without further ado, let's get it out and we will get on with the tasting then. Very curious to see how this one turns out. Yeah, nice little bit of smoke on the opening then, and we'll get it out and into the glass. Just look at that. We'll try and get a bit more of a head on it. Sometimes with these big ABV beers, it can be difficult to get a head on them. But yeah, you're getting just a little bit ahead on that. So yeah, the head in this one, just in case it kind of disappears a little bit, the head on this one is a very, very dark kind of tan, sort of very, very dark tan, almost like military tan kind of colour, but that's fading away to be a very, very thin, just foamy layer. And I'll tell you straight away, as soon as you pour this beer, you can smell the booze off of this. But yeah, pretty much in terms of appearance, there's nothing surprising about this. You know, it's a very, very dark ebony rosewood colour. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass and a few little ones just heading up towards the bottom of that head there. But you know, overall, it looks pretty much as you would expect from one of these big Imperial Stouts. You know, it looks absolutely lovely. You could see how oily this beer was when we poured it out. But one of the things that I've always said about Japanese beers is, regardless of what kind of style and things it was, you know, it always retains a little bit of that Japanese drinkability. To the Japanese, a beer, regardless of whether it's a craft beer or not, it must have an element of drinkability to it. But the other thing is, they always like to use a little bit of sake rice quite normally in the brewing, and it gives the malt base just a little bit of that almost ricey but slightly oily sweetness too, and it works, I think, very, very well. It's kind of an art itself, kind of combining these sake brewing techniques and the craft beer brewing techniques as well. So yeah, beautiful looking beer this, as you can see, lovely dark ebony rosewood colour, pretty much nothing surprising in terms of its appearance. So let's take a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we get on. I can smell some lovely, almost like peaty, and there's a lot of nice lovely whisky notes coming out of this one just as you open it up. That's just a beautiful smelling beer. I don't think I've ever had an Imperial Stout that smelled quite like this one. You know, straight away you get these nice big whisky notes, and it's kind of it's got a lovely big oaky character to it, you know, lovely big oaky notes. You've got some nice dark chocolate in there as well. It's kind of like a high percentage cocoa chocolate, you know, like 80-90% cocoa chocolate, I would say. There is a little bit of a milky sweetness, a milky chocolate sweetness in there as well, but mainly it's a kind of high cocoa chocolate there. There is some brown sugar as well. It's a mix between the kind of, you know, the treacle molasses, but it does have, again, it has a little bit of that element of sweetness to it. But the whisky aromas in this one are really pushing their way out. It's got this really lovely big whisky note to it. And the whisky itself, it's kind of almost a little bit like, it does have an element of peatiness to it, but at the same time it's got an element of sweetness. As I always say, you get, mainly for me, you get three main types of whiskey. You'll get the citrusy ones, you'll get the slightly sweeter ones, the kind of brown sugary ones, and you'll also get the more peated ones as well. And for me, this one, the whiskey notes in this are a balance between the kind of sweeter kind of things, but also there's an element of a peaty quality in there as well. But regardless, you know, when you talk about smoke malts in Scotland, even then, when you talk about like kind of smoky and peaty things, the Scottish peatiness is a little bit more earthy and grassy, whereas I think the peaty quality in this one, if it's Japanese peated malts, it's you know, it's definitely a little bit more of a kind of, it's definitely slightly sweeter in terms of its aroma than the Scottish ones, but it does retain a little bit of that earthy and grassy quality. And I would be guessing, if they are actually producing peat in Japan, I don't know whether it's possible to do that, maybe in Hokkaido right enough, because the climate is kind of similar to like Scotland and Central Europe and things like that. The peatiness in this does definitely smell a little bit more kind of sweet to me than a Scottish kind of peated thing would as well. But the whiskey note that this beer has is absolutely lovely. It's got the chocolate and things like that. You can smell that there's a little bit of a roasty black malt in this one as the backbone as well, which is just lovely. Definitely a little bit of earthy hop as well, which again is what you would expect. And there's a little bit, when you take it in a little bit more deeply, it definitely has a little touch of red fruit, but it's quite faint actually. You know, the aromas for this one, it's definitely the earthy hops, the roasty black malt, those chocolatey and brown sugar notes that I was talking about, and the whiskey, as I say, those whiskey elements that are coming out of this beer are very, very prominent. So keep that in mind when you go to actually have a taste of this beer. This is one that is definitely worth lingering over the aroma a little bit, because I have to admit, I have never ever come across an Imperial Stout, especially a barrel-aged one, that is smelled quite like this. You know, this is just a beautiful smelling beer, this one. It's 13% as well, so it is going to have a lot of complexity to it. But yeah, let's not wait any longer. Let's have a go at this beer then. So this one is the Takashi Ichiro, an Imperial Stout at 13% ABV from Tamamura Honten and Shiga Kogen in Yamanouchi in Nagano Prefecture, Japan, brewed in collaboration with the Chichibu Distillery from Saitama Prefecture, aged for a year in their barrels. Let's get stuck in. Sláinte, skål, kanpai, Happy New Year, Happy Hogmanay for 2019. Sláinte, skål, kanpai. Yeah, right. You can probably tell by the big massive grin on my face how good this beer is. You know, it really is one of these ones where you're just like, hell yeah. You know, there's a hell of a lot going on in this beer. It's one of these ones that almost just overloads your senses a little bit. The first impression of this beer is it's leaning a little bit towards the roasty, toasty side of things the further into the aftertaste you go. But it starts off very sweet, and it's got a lovely big kind of oily mouthfeel to it. This is just a top class beer. And I shouldn't be surprised, because this brewery are really damn good. I need to review some of their sakes for you on here. But yeah, this is really, really nice. So let's try and break this one down then. There's a hell of a lot going on in this beer. So yeah, straight away with this one, it comes in and it's very oily, and it's got a good balance between the different kind of sweetnesses in there. You can feel that there's a sort of roasty black malt backbone to this one, and that kind of blankets the middle of your tongue. On top of that, you get the brown sugars. It's quite a toasty kind of syrupy brown sugar there. That kind of just, again, that just sort of blankets the middle of your tongue. There's some nice kind of chocolatey sweetness in there as well. The caramel flavours I'm finding are kind of the sort of roasty brown sugars. It's actually quite a dark sort of treacly molasses type thing that comes in, but it's interesting because to me it seems to be spreading all across the middle of your palate. This beer definitely has an element of a woody quality to it as well, and it's almost like the woody flavour that this beer has again is blanketing the whole centre of your palate. It's really interesting how all these flavours are kind of going together. Yeah, and that sort of whiskey element that the beer has too. I think it's probably better to just kind of start again, because it's more, you have to take a few sips of this beer before you kind of analyse it too much. So for me, as I say, roasty black malt backbone, you've definitely got this element of woody, oaky quality kind of infused into that. The whole flavour of the beer in the centre of the palate for me is quite infused. But to me, it definitely has a little bit of an almost really kind of well toasty brown sugar. So it's black, the kind of roasty black malts, the woody qualities a little bit, those nice oaky woods, and also a little bit of the kind of brown sugars, like a really toasted, well fired brown sugar. So that just kind of mixed in the centre of the palate. When you go right into the centre of your tongue, you can pick up some of the nice kind of slightly sweeter caramels there, and the slightly sweeter, slightly more kind of treacly kind of thing. That's sitting right in the middle of your palate there, and just when you go outside of that a little bit, that's where you're getting the chocolatey notes. And again, for me, the chocolatey qualities that this beer has, they're quite kind of high cocoa, you know. I think sort of 80%-ish sort of cocoa level you're getting out of the things in this one. And yeah, the whiskey flavour, it's just when you swallow the beer and the liquid kind of disappears off your tongue, that's when these whiskey kind of notes come out, and they start to appear a little bit again the further into the aftertaste you go. The hoppy side of this beer, to be honest, is pretty simple. In the back corners of your palate, you've got a nice big kind of earthy bitterness there. You can feel that in the back corners of your palate, and it does have this beer I think does have a good degree of IBU to it. And of course, with this one, you know, you could, I think it's saying that it's being bottled on the 18th of November. You know, with a beer like this, you could easily age this for at minimum 10 years. You know, you could age this beer for absolutely ages, and it may well get a little bit sweeter as you go further and further into the bottle with this one, and maybe the hops would drop a little bit. But for me, this one does have a little touch of IBU to it. The further forward you come along the tongue, it just smooths out a little bit, and then you go round the very front curve of the palate. There is a tiny little element of a kind of grassy note to this one. Now, I'm not sure exactly what hops they would have used in this one. Maybe, you know, Williamette from America would be a possibility. I don't think it's got Fugos or something. I don't think it's got Fugos in it. That's quite a popular hop from England. Kent Goldings might be one that they would use. But this one really is. This is a special beer. This is just really, really nice. It's definitely unlike any other Imperial Stout that I've come across before. The flavours are just coming out completely differently in this one. Yeah. It's really cool how everything kind of goes together in this beer. When you come a little bit further forward on the palate, you've definitely got a little element of a nutty quality coming out of this beer, and the woody elements come out a little bit more as well. It's got a nice kind of smooth, but there's almost a little kind of tiny bit of spice or something from the wood in this beer as well, which is really interesting. But the roasty black malt backbone and that earthiness from the hops really build a good bridge between the different flavours, and there's a hell of a lot going on in this one. Those whiskey flavours are just infused throughout the whole beer. It's like the woody notes that I was talking about, the kind of oaky notes, and the whiskey flavours are just like infused together, and it works. It does work very, very well. As I say, I like how everything in this beer just goes together. This is definitely one where it's all about how these flavours just merge together. On the fruity side of things with this one, then, yeah, fruity side of this beer, it does have a little bit of an almost kind of plummy sharpness to it or something. But the further into the aftertaste you go, as I say, this beer, it becomes a little bit more roasty, but as your palate adjusts to it, the aftertaste is becoming gradually more sweet, and more of the brown sugars are coming out. As I say, it's more like a syrupy kind of treacle molasses sort of thing that's coming out of this one, and I like how that all goes together. So on the fruity side of things, there is a little bit of a plummy sharpness, like I was saying, but the further into the aftertaste that you go, yeah, it's plummy to start with, and it's got a little bit of that raisiny sharpness in there as well. It's almost a little bit cakey actually, the mouthfeel. This one like a whiskey infused cake, or something like this. I like how that goes together, but the further into the aftertaste you go, it becomes a little bit more like a kind of figgy flavour that comes out of the fruity side of this beer. The aftertaste is definitely the earthy hops, a little bit of the roasty black malt backbone, and it's almost like a battle between the chocolate, the brown sugars, and the kind of whiskey flavours too. It's just an absolutely stunning beer, this. And you know, this is definitely one of the more unusual Imperial Stouts that I've reviewed. I've reviewed some cracking Imperial Stouts on the channel, but this one I think definitely probably would win it would win the contest of the most kind of unusual one, I guess you would say. It's just the way the flavours come out of this is very, very nice. So yeah, if you get the chance to try this beer, I would highly, highly recommend that you do. If you like, you know, whiskey, if you like whiskey infused beers and whiskey, I don't think it's whiskey infused right enough. It's just barrel aged, but yeah, you know, if you like things like the Belgian quadruples, I know that Galden Carolus, the whiskey infused one that you saw me do a few videos back, if you like that beer, this is one I think that you're definitely going to enjoy. It's just like a slightly darker version of that. That's what this beer really reminds me of, the Galden Carolus Cuvée Van de Keyser whiskey infused version. It really is, it's almost just like an Imperial Stout version of that, but it's got the whiskey notes, as I was saying in this earlier on, and they've got a little bit of a balance between sweet and peaty, and I think the Galden Carolus was just a little bit more to the sweet side of things, but a beautiful, beautiful beer nonetheless. In terms of the mouthfeel then, yeah, this beer, I don't think there's much question about that. It is a full-bodied beer. The Japanese craft beers, right enough, are always a little bit lighter in body than the sort of Western beers, if you like, are the American ones and the European ones. And as I always say, that's just because they like a little bit of a kind of drinkability to it. The mouthfeel overall with this beer is very, very oily. Carbonation is you know, very, very smooth in this one. There is a little bit of it there, but it's almost completely absent. There is very little carbonation in this beer, but there is just enough to give it a little bit of that kind of typical Japanese drinkability. Nice little bit of bitterness from the hops. I would guess this beer somewhere around the kind of 50, maybe 60-ish IBU mark. It's got a little bit of IBU coming both from the black malts that are in this and a little bit from the hops as well. The malt base is really interesting because it's trying to find the balance between the kind of roasty qualities and the sweet side of things. I think it leans a little bit more. It starts off a bit sweeter, and then in the aftertaste it becomes a little bit more roasty and toasty, but again, as you drink more and more of this, the aftertaste does become a little bit sweeter, and it's also got a little element of a kind of juicy, fruity side of things to it as well. It's got everything you would want from an Imperial Stout, and an added good bit of complexity as well. At 13.0%, not 13.2. It really does kind of cover the alcohol well. It's just a beautiful, beautiful beer, and it's one that I highly recommend you have a go at if you get a chance. So let's leave it at that for this one. So yeah, this one was the Takashi Ichiro, an Imperial Stout at 13% ABV from Tamamura Honten Shiga Kogen beer, brewed in collaboration or aged in barrels from the Chichibu Distillery in Saitama Prefecture in Japan. Just a beautiful, beautiful Imperial Stout. And I think this was a very, very good way to kind of sign off 2018. It's been a very, very interesting year, lots of positives, and yeah, thank you again for all your support over this year. But once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Tamamura Honten Shiga Kogen beer in the comment section below. Hopefully I can review one of the whiskies from the Chichibu Distillery for you at some point soon. I'm sure I'll live in Japan within the next kind of 10 years or something. I'm sure that's something that will be on the cards at some point soon. But yeah, beautiful, beautiful beer. Thank you again for all your support. Make sure you check out my social media, and you will see some more interesting beer reviews in 2019. I've got a really interesting review for you tomorrow, and then there's a very special video for you on the 2nd of January, and then we're going to be back to the usual sort of beer, like lots of different beer reviews, some whiskey and reviews and things like that as well. So I hope you enjoy 2019, enjoy it with friends and family, and thanks again for watching. Slàinte, Skål, Kampai, try this beer if you get the chance.